In modern nymphing, like any form of nymphing, the cast is always the hardest to get good at. And drop shot nymphing is no different. It's a difficult cast to master, but once you get and understand the do's and don'ts of what we want to do right and what we want to do wrong, getting that baseline knowledge, you'll be able to fit that into your own nymphing style.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Mike at Northwest School of Fly Fishing, the Old Fish Hobo, and I'm going to talk to you today about drop shot nymphing, but in particular the drop shot nymphing cast. I've done quite a few things on drop shotting from here and there, little bits and pieces on drop shotting, and there's a lot of questions going on, and probably one of the most difficult things to understand about any form of or style of nymphing is the cast. So drop shot nymphing has a cast very similar to the Euro styles. As a matter of fact, we borrowed it from the Euro styles. So there's some do's and don'ts in drop shot nymphing casting. And I got a video here coming up that's going to show me doing the do's and the don'ts so that you can see it and actually see what I'm talking about instead of looking at me in front of a camera doing this stuff. But basically, the do's is we always want to have the rod somewhat high in our hand. In our particular case in the video, you're going to see that the current is coming from my right into my right arm. So that means my arm is in the current. If the current was coming from my left to right, I would have a very easy way to do this. Just have my rod out and I can really maneuver. But when I have the current the opposite of that going in this direction, it's coming right at my right arm. It forces me to bring my right arm out. And when I put the flies in the river, I have a current coming right at me, and you'll see me strip in a little bit trying to catch up on that, and you watch for that. So I have the current that way. I wanted to show you the most difficult cast in any kind of nymphing is when the current's coming right at your right arm, or if you're lefty, coming right at your left arm. So basically the do's are really we got to have that tight line in our cast. The tight line has to be in the cast, and the tight line has to be in moving the fly through the water. And the tight line is that instant the trout hits, we feel it right in the rod tip. And that requires you to actually move the flies at the same speed or slightly faster than the current. So what I'm talking about is moving that just like that. But when we get a break in our tight line, or our fly line gets real loose, we don't have that tight line. So the do's and don'ts of this cast is we have to be able to make that cast with our rod up, and we have to immediately make that tight line drift all the way through. You'll see me switch hands as I bring it through. I want it to come all the way through, bring my rod up, and hand it back over to my right hand and make that cast. That cast is a flick, and the reel has got to be chin high. Yeah, you'll see me get lazy because I've been doing this for 100 years, and I'm really good at it. But if you're just new to this and trying to learn how to correct your mistakes, get that rod up high when you make that cast, straight up, and high when you make that cast. And it's like flicking paint in the air. And then when the cast goes in, I immediately straighten out my line, and the rod is always moving with the fly. Always moving with the fly. And when I get back to the bottom, as my line curls up, I want to lift my rod up, line out of the water, so that my leader straightens out. I can then bring it back over here and make that cast again. And you'll also see the technique of flipping or flopping on the water. When I have a bunch of fly line here, or I got to strip in a bunch of fly line and I have it all right here, I can't get my line out. We have to flip that out. We'll flip it, or what we call flopping, and all the way downstream until I get that straight line up. Now the don'ts are, we don't do those things. But the biggest don'ts I see is really when you're going to make your cast, you're not bringing the rod up, you're bringing it across, and we'll show that. Trying to flip, all you've got is all your line underwater, and you got an underwater loop or a tailing loop underwater, and it just doesn't go anywhere you want it to go, and it just becomes this mess. So that's probably the number one reason, or number one problem I see guys making this cast, is they allow that rod to dip down wherever the fly's going to go wherever the rod tip is. So if I have my rod tip low, it's just going to go low, scooting out, and I can't get it up. When my rod tip is up high, okay, I'm able to just, my tips are very high, and I'll be able to make that flip, bring it over, and pull it through. The other problem I see in doing wrong in drop shot nymphing is we allow slack to get in our line, and we can't feel the trout on it. And that's the death knell to any modern form of nymphing, is we have to move the fly slightly faster than the current and keeping that line tight. The minute we let that line get loose, we lose contact with the fly and the trout. The last thing is not getting that straight line behind you. And if I don't have a straight line, you'll see me, I'll just quickly flip it up and flip it back until I get that straight line. So enjoy the video. I'll have the do's and don'ts. I'll walk you through it. And if I'm lucky, I'll see you on the river.
Well, let's start out with the do's. You can see I want my reel to be chin high, and I want my rod to be moving constantly with the movement of the fly, keeping that line nice and tight. That's the whole key to most forms of modern nymphing, but certainly in drop shotting. My flies are slightly off to bottom. I want to raise the rod, again, up to my chin and making that flick of paint movement. Here you see me, again, moving the rod slightly faster. The rod's always in movement. If my rod's in movement, that means my fly is moving and drifting through the current to the fish. At the very end, I want to raise the rod up in a vertical position, straightening the line behind me. These are the do's. You want to do this. You want to get that rod up behind you so that your leader straightens out behind you. Here I have it high, and I can just flick it back and forth if I want to get that straight line, pop it out there. You see here I've extended the cast about 4 feet, and as my line lays out, I have to strip that slack in to get that tight line. That's the do's. You want a tight line. You want to move the fly slightly faster than the current or the same speed as the current. Raise the rod up here. That's going to straighten my leader. Move the rod back forward and another paintbrush flick. Rod's always in movement. If your rod's not moving with the fly in the current, then you're losing contact with your flies. And the number one enemy of any form of nymph fishing is losing contact with your flies on the bottom. By maintaining a nice drift, a nice movement of your fly, keeping it with the speed or slightly faster than the current, you'll keep in good contact. Here I'm flipping, making sure that I get my line straight behind me, and out I go again. So really the do's really are, you want to make sure that your rod is in a vertical position at the end of your drift, bringing it back to a vertical position for the cast. So as a key marker for you, you want your rod vertically up for the cast, and you want your rod vertically up after the retrieve. That vertical movement of your rod up behind you is going to create that pull of the river on your nymph, straightening your line. Well, let's take a look at the don'ts. Here you're going to see the number one mistake we make in drop shot nymphing is not bringing our rod up on the cast. We're casting with a horizontal rod, and it causes a disconnect between the fly and the rod tip. You see the trouble I'm having here, and it's the most inaccurate way to deliver your fly. You'll never put your nymphs where you need to be using a horizontal cast. And you can see the disconnect right now. I'm not moving those flies. They're moving on their own. I couldn't tell if my flies are bouncing on the bottom or I have a trout. I would probably catch no fish. But, you know, we struggle, and the two don'ts that we really don't want to do is make that rod in a horizontal position. You're just doing an underwater open loop, and it's the most inaccurate form. It creates a lot of loose line in your cast, and you lose the tight line between the flies and your fingers. See, I'm not even moving the rod here. The line's drifting on its own. I don't know if I have a fish or not. And that's the death nail in any form of modern nymphing. Certainly it's the death nail in drop shot nymphing. The key is you must do that right. So I'm demonstrating here for those that are curious the best way to make a cast, or how get the most accurate cast in drop shot nymphing, and the easiest cast in drop shot nymphing is the amount of fly line you have out equals the length of your fly rod. So I have a 10-foot fly rod, and I want 10 feet of fly line out. That doesn't mean I can't make a longer cast. It just means that the longer cast is not going to be as accurate or as easy as that 10-foot fly line, 10-foot cast. Together with a 10-foot leader, I've got 20 feet of line out there. Well, those are the do's and don'ts. Good luck. Hope to see you on the river. Please subscribe. Help me to make more channels or more videos just like this. So hope to see you on the river.